Okay, so I think we're going to start. Again, for those of you who've just joined, welcome. Thank you for coming. We have a very interesting line of presenters tonight, and I hope that you will all enjoy. But first, I'm going to share a few words about the center. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I don't know if you can all see. If someone can unmute and let me know if they can see the screen. Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
I can see
I
it.
can see it. No problem.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, so welcome to tonight's event, everyone. I hope that you will enjoy yourselves. So just a few words before we start. First, I know we're all meeting virtually, but nevertheless, I do want to take the time to acknowledge that where we usually meet, which is at John Abbott College, and also at the clubhouse across from Highway 40, is unceded Indigenous lands of the traditional territory of both the Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk and the Anishinaabe Algonquin peoples. We are grateful for the opportunity to gather here, and we thank the many generations of people who have taken care of this land and these waters. Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for diverse First Nations. Thus, we recognize and deeply appreciate the historic and ongoing Indigenous connections to and presence on these lands and waters. We also recognize the contributions Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples have made in shaping and strengthening our communities. Together, as a diverse community, we commit to building a sincere relationship with Indigenous peoples based on respect, dignity, trust, and cooperation in the process of advancing truth and reconciliation. So, welcome to RASC Montreal Centre, or the virtual Montreal Centre. So, for those of you who don't know, it was founded in 1860. The Royal Astronomical Society of Canada was founded in 1868 and is Canada's leading astronomy organizations. We have more than 30 centers across the country with more than 4,000 amateur educators, professional members. So really people from all walks of life and of all ages. And we are also the largest active astronomy group in Canada. The Montreal Centre was established in 1918, and we have over 160 members, again, of all ages and backgrounds. So just a quick update of the upcoming events for this winter of 2021. These are the members events. So as members, you get access to more events, exclusive members events. So we have member clubhouses every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. And we also have in-person events, although, you know, as everyone is probably well aware, that is currently not the situation, but as soon as the government allows for safe in-person gatherings, hopefully we will be able to bring you back good old in-person astronomy and events. Just an update, this Saturday and Sunday is the ISS Transit of the Sun. It will be visible from Montreal. So if ever you have time, you can have a look at that. Usually on the CSA website, you can find out exactly at what time and what location the ISS will be transiting. And finally, on February 18th, there's going to be an event for the Mars 2020 landing. In fact, it's going to be there's also going to be a public event given by Dr. Richard Léveillé. He is a teacher at John Abbott College, and he's also worked for NASA previously on Mars missions. And so that event will be on Saturday, February 27th at 8 p.m. EST. If you want more information, you can always visit the RASC Montreal website to the calendar by following the link. And And of course, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact the center. And hopefully you will enjoy this event and many other public events to come, and maybe even some member events. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I will pass it on to my colleague. Oh, stop share. Oh, and for those of you who do not know me, my name is Virginia. I am a youth member of the Montreal Centre. I am an alumni from John Abbott College, and I'm currently studying physics and mathematics at Bishop's University. And now I will introduce you to, well, Lakshmi will introduce herself. Let me just spotlight her so you can all see. And go ahead, Lakshmi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Virginia, for passing it on to me. So I guess I'll start by introducing myself so I don't forget. I'm Lakshmi. I'm a second-year computer engineering student at McGill. And yeah, I'm excited to partner with RASC for this amazing event that we have tonight. So I'm just going to share my screen so I can talk a little bit about my club, POW. Nope. Present. There we go. Okay, so everyone can see my screen? Okay, I see a nod, thank you. Okay, so POW stands for Promoting Opportunities for Women in Engineering. So basically we're a club of women in engineering at McGill. And I'm just gonna talk a little bit about what we do and why we exist. So if you came to our last panel, you might have already seen these slides, but I'm just gonna repeat myself. So why does POW exist? Well, for starters, women only account for 30.1% of engineering students at McGill. And that's actually the most in any Canadian university, which is good, but 30 isn't really where we want to be. Of course, we want to be 50-50. And also only about 13% of engineers working in the industry today are actually women. Obviously, we believe that in an industry like engineering, we need to do better and we need to have more diversity, because more diversity means more ideas. And yeah, so our goal in POW is to motivate students to join engineering or STEM in general and help increase those numbers. So what's POW's mission and vision? So here are some of the main things that we aim for. So we want to encourage women, including cis women, feminine, aligned, non-binary people. We're very inclusive, to join engineering, and we expose them to different career opportunities using like events like this. And then we also want to enlighten everyone about the important contributions of women in STEM and engineering. And of course, we want to promote inclusion and diversity. So although POW is focused towards women in engineering, we of course invite any allies and men to join our club as well. So I'm specifically a part of POW's outreach portfolio. We reach out to high schools, colleges, and McGill students and promote like events like this. So we have a more hands-on approach. And yeah, here are some of our events on the side. I won't go through them all, but we have panels like this, for instance, and we have something called POW Conference, which I'll be talking about a little later. Oh, a little later as in now. So yeah, POW Conference is like a day-long event. Usually we have it in person. Of course, we can't have this many people in a room this year. Yeah, so it's happening this February 20th, so the upcoming week, I think, or the one after. And it's open to all high school and college female identifying students. Yeah, and we're basically going to have panels. We're going to have a little design workshop. You get to learn about the different types of engineering, and you get to meet a lot of people. So if you're here as a McGill student by any chance, you can scan this QR code on your phone camera and maybe be a volunteer if you'd like. And if you're a high school or college student, you can actually be an attendee and scan the QR code on the right side. I'm also going to drop a little PDF in the chat that you can check out for more information. And that's about it for me. If you want to learn more about POW, if you want to talk to me, you can reach out to me on Facebook or wherever you want. My name is on the top of the screen, I guess. Yeah, and more QR codes if you want to follow us on social media and keep up with POW. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing screen, get out of here. Okay, so we're gonna start off the night with our first panelist, and that'll be Dominique McKenzie. So Dominique is a retired science teacher who spent most of her career working in adult education, and now she's an active member of RASC Montreal Centre. So Dominique, take it away.
Yes, okay. So hi, so I'm going to be talking about the past, some women who have left a legacy in astronomy that we still today admire. We still, their research they did is still relevant today. So I'm going to start my PowerPoint here. I need to share, okay. I have my, okay, I'll start the PowerPoint and then I'll share it. Slideshow, custom, okay, and this one. Come here.
I just exited PowerPoint.
I just exited my PowerPoint, okay. Okay.
Alt, tab.
Yeah, slideshow. Oh. Okay, well, where's my slideshow here? I can't see my, wait, just, can I drop this down? Yeah, fine.
Slideshow.
Okay.
Move it over.
From beginning, Agosh.
Yeah, no, I want
Custom slideshow.
the custom one
Okay.
because I had to take out slides.
Make it big, yeah.
Okay, here it is. Okay.
It didn't start.
No,
Oh, there.
There's a button.
here resume. Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Okay, here it is. So I'm going to talk about the Harvard Observatory and the women, 4 women in particular, and their discoveries. So I'm in the late 19th century, early 20th century. So we have to remember late 19th century since it's the Harvard Observatory, we're in the United States and the Civil War is going to end in 1865. And then we're going to go to the 1900 and 1914, 1918, you're going to get the First World War. 18 to 20, you're going to get a pandemic. So just to situate you at that period. So this is the Harvard Observatory, and these were the women. These pictures, we see them fairly often. So I'm going to talk about Amina Fleming, Antonia Mori, Annie Jump Cannon, and Henrietta Leavitt. All women that did quite some important work. So the definition, there are sometimes called computers, because the definition is one who computes, supposed to be following strict rules, has no authority to deviate from them in any detail. So that's from Wikipedia. Now, I don't like the word computer for these women because they did far more than just sit and calculate. So if we look at Mrs. Williamina Patton Stevens Fleming, she was born in Scotland, and at 14, she was smart enough that she was allowed to become a teacher at the same time as a student. She gets married at 20 years old and she immigrated with her husband to Boston. As soon as she arrives in Boston, he abandons her and she finds out she's pregnant. So you have to remember, we're in the late 19th century, and that is not a very good situation for a woman. She has to find employment, and Mrs. Pickering, who's married to Professor Pickering, who works at he's the director of the Harvard Observatory. She's going to hire her as a maid. Professor Pickering at that time is at the Harvard Observatory, and his interest is in photometry. So they're starting to take images of the sky. And at one point, he gets really upset with his graduate student, who he finds is totally disorganized. And the folklore goes that he says, my maid could do a better job. On the other hand, some historians have said that probably Mrs. Pickering and Dr. Pickering were very generous towards Mrs. Fleming. And he probably brought her to the observatory to work because it was required less laborious work. And she was pretty smart. They recognized that. So she's going to go back. They're going to pay her. They're going to pay her fees to go back to Scotland and have her baby. And she's going to come back and work part-time observatory, part-time at their home. And then in 1881, she's going to become part of the research staff at the observatory. Her job is going to be to oversee the other women computers. So we have to remember that astronomy in the late 18th century, it's not like today. Amateur astronomers do very interesting work, and they have better equipment than the professional astronomers. The Harvard Observatory can survive if it raises its own money. So they rely on donations, and they sell, for example, precise time. So their job is to calculate precisely what the time is, and they sell that information to raise money. So what's going to happen is that the observatory is going to get two big grants or money from these very rich heiresses. In one case, Mrs. Draper is going to want her husband's work to continue, and he was doing spectrums of stars. And what she's going to, since she wants that legacy to keep on going, what she's going to do is at one point she's going to get with Professor Pickering, and she's going to install a telescope at the Harvard Observatory, and they're going to start doing a lot of photographic plates of the northern sky. Also, Professor Pickering is going to get in touch with another Harris, I'm sorry, I'm French, Catherine Wolfe Bruce, and she's going to donate the funds to build an observatory down in the southern hemisphere. And so they're going to do photographic plates and spectra of stars in the southern sky. So you can imagine the north and the south, they're going to start imaging the sky, and that's going to make an awful lot of plates. And Mrs. Pickering is going to be in charge of organizing the women, the computer women, and she's going to be in charge also of cataloging these plates. She's going to find a way to label them so they can be easily retrieved. Mrs. Fleming, I'm sorry, Mrs. Fleming. And what she's going to do is she's going to put them in brown envelopes, and she's going to make index cards like you have in a library. And when somebody's going to have a plate and something interesting on it, they immediately going to be able to see plates taken previous nights and compare them. That's going to be part of her work. And there's going to be a string of discoveries done from these plates, which are absolutely amazing. So her accomplishments are going to be, when she moves into the observatory to work, Professor Pickering had made a classification for spectra, but he's going to tell her improve on it. So she's going to make a classification A to N, and it's going to be based on hydrogen lines. She's going to publish the Draper Catalog of Stellar Spectra in 1890, and you can imagine that catalog has to be published because Mrs. Draper is giving a lot of money for that work to be done. She's going to become curator of astronomical photographs at Harvard in 1898. She's going to be the first woman to hold the title. She's going to publish photographic study of variable stars in 1908. She's going to discover novas, nebulas, variable stars, spectroscopic doubles. She's going to establish the first photographic standards used to measure the brightness of variable stars. And in 1893, she's going to give a speech at the Chicago World Fair to promote women in astronomy. And she's going to encourage observatories to hire more women. And Professor Pickering tried to nominate her for the Bruce Award, which was an astronomy award, but she was never chosen. And for all of you who would like to do stargazing, yeah, I've got it. In the corner right here, here is the Horsehead Nebula. And she was the first one in 1888 to identify it. So this is one of the plates from the observatory, which I thought were pretty good because I checked the corners and the stars are pretty round. And the other one is Maury, Antonia Maury. So she's going to be Mrs. Draper's niece. And in 1889, what's interesting about the three other women I'm going to talk to is they all went to college. So you have to think this is the late 19th century. And women colleges are starting to appear from donors or donating money to build these colleges. And she's going to come out of Vassar College. Today it's co-ed, but back then it was strictly a women's college. And she's going to study under Maria Mitchell. And it's, if you want to read some interesting quotes, go check out Maria Mitchell. She was way ahead of her time. And she's going to earn a bachelor's degrees in physics, astronomy, and philosophy. And Vassar College, when it was built with an observatory from the get-go. It was very important for women to study physics and astronomy. And she's going to establish a classification. They're going to try to classify these stars according to their spectral lines. Mrs. Fleming had done A to N, but Antonia Maury is going to make her own classification, and she's going to do interesting things. For example, in her classification, the first one will be the B category of Mrs. Fleming, and then the A category will be the her second category. She's going to also look at lines, the width and sharpness. And this is, she's going to attribute categories A, B, and C. And this is all going to cause a big debate on how these plates should be analyzed, how these spectrums should be analyzed. And she's going to do the northern sky. She's going to publish. So she's going to publish in 1897 the spectra of bright stars photographed with the 11-inch Draper. Under her name and with her classification, and it's going to be the first publication credited to a woman in the annals of the Astronomical Observatory of Harvard College. And she insisted that her name be put first. She didn't want the director of the observatory's name to appear. And she's going to work at the observatory on and off until 1918. She really likes to teach, and she's going to become, in 1918, she's going to become an adjunct professor of physics at Harvard. Now, let's all remember, these women are still not allowed to vote, but they're doing extraordinary work. And Annie Jump Cannon, she's going to arrive at the Harvard Observatory in 1896, and she's going to have studied at Wellesley College in physics. Get her degree in physics in 1984 under Sarah Frances Whiting, I suppose. And she's going to be studying the southern sky because she's going to deal with the plates coming in from the Southern Observatory. And she's going to come up with the classification OBA. Maury had put B before A. She's going to take the letters and put them OBAF G, KM. And in 1901, she's going to publish her findings. She's going to become curator of astronomical photographs once Mrs. Fleming is going to die. And in 1924, she's going to publish again more of the Henry Draper catalog. She's going to publish 225,000 stars and spectra brighter than 10th magnitude. The interesting thing about Cannon is that women were not allowed to operate the telescopes at the Harvard Observatory until Annie Cannon came to the observatory. If we look here, she was trained by Sarah Frances Whiting in physics and how to use a telescope. And Sarah Frances Whiting was allowed to sit in the graduate classes of Professor Pickering when he was teaching at MIT. So what's interesting is that she gets trained by him, she goes to Wellesley College, then she trains women who are absolutely competent to work on telescopes, and then it's hard for the observatory not to allow women to work on these telescopes. And she will classify 350,000 stars in her lifetime. Today, this is what we have. We can see here the OBA, FGKM, the classification. This was worked on further on, but we can see that the initial work they did still lives on, which is kind of amazing. And the other one, my other heroine, is Henrietta Swan-Leavitt. Very interesting. She will go to Radcliffe. So Radcliffe is a college associated with Harvard. Women were not allowed to go to Harvard, and I can't remember his name. He wanted his daughter absolutely to go to Harvard. So he came to an agreement that he would build a college, and the professors from Harvard would go teach at Radcliffe. So what's interesting about this is that women are not allowed to work at Harvard, but the observatory is free to hire women. They're like independent from that point of view. So the astronomers, the observatory, they're going to go to Radcliffe, and they're going to get these women to work at their observatory. So so she'll graduate in 1892. And in 1903, she's going to be assigned the small Magellanic Cloud and the large Magellanic Cloud variable stars to work on. And she's going to study this Cepheid variables. And she's going to establish a relationship between the period of a star to its absolute magnitude. And then she's going to publish 2 works in 1908 and in 1912. And when she publishes periods of 25 variable stars in the small Magellanic Cloud, where's my mouse? Oh, there it is. Oh, I can't show my mouse. Okay. Look to the left. The plot there was from a paper she prepared in 1912. And that relationship is...
Sorry. Trying to show your mouse.
Yeah. Okay. That relationship is a linear relationship, and Hubble is going to use that relationship to determine that Andromeda is outside our galaxy. Finally determined, because they weren't sure if they were in our galaxy or out. And in his paper is going to clearly mention her name and say that she would be worthy of a Nobel Prize. And in 1924, a member of the Swedish Academy of Sciences, Gustav Mittag-Leffler, he was a mathematician because there's no Nobel Prizes for astronomers, wanted to nominate her for Nobel Prize, but she had died 3 years earlier, so therefore she wasn't eligible. But both Hubble and this mathematician thought her discovery was major in the way we perceive our universe. You know, for now, there were galaxies outside our own, and that was a major step forward. So this is one of her plates where she would analyze, and I thought that was interesting because they kept all her markings because they're historically significant. And this is Hubble's picture when he had written a little n on top, and then he crossed it to write variable because he found out that it was a Cepheid variable, and then he was able to use her law to determine that the galaxy was outside. And even the Hubble Space Telescope, they made a point of calling it the most important star in the history of cosmology, and they show here its variation. So I thought that she did a pretty important discovery. So how much did they earn? 25 to 50 cents an hour. Leavitt was earning 30 cents an hour. At one point, she mentions her salary. Back in the late 19th century, early 20th, I guess, in manufacturing, you earned about 15 cents an hour. Mrs. Fleming chides Pickering for not paying her as much as the men at the observatory were earning. She was earning $1,500 a year, and the men were earning $2,500 a year. At the time, if we want a reference, New York female teachers, so female teachers in the state of New York made $600 a year, and males made $900 a year. So people work 6 days a week, often 9 hours a day, but at the observatory, they worked a bit less. They have no retirement benefits and they work until they die. So men have a life expectancy of 48 and women 50. I have to say that Mrs. Fleming will die at 54. She will die of pneumonia. Dr. Draper, from whom the legacy came, died of pneumonia. Professor Pickering died of pneumonia, and Leavitt is going to die young too. It's quite. When I was reading all their biographies, it's kind of sad in a way. Pickering, who will have hire all these women graduates. At one point he says, I'm going to have to start paying them more because these women have college degrees, just like the man he's hiring. And at that time, there were so few jobs for women in science that young ladies with college degrees were willing to work for nothing at the observatory to prove themselves. However, Mrs. Fleming did not like that policy. She wanted them to come work and women to earn a salary. And that's it. So these are my stop share. Yeah, so these are my heroines. I thought it was really interesting studying that period because there's a whole story that goes with these, after the Civil War, these colleges popping everywhere, and these colleges dedicated for women. And I was quite impressed with some of the physics labs they had. And there were more students in the physics class of Maria Mitchell than there were when I was in physics at McGill. So I was quite surprised. She had a really big physics class. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Dominique, for that very interesting presentation. I admit I didn't know of a lot of things, and I hope that everyone learned from it. So we are going to move on to the next speaker. But before I do so, I just want to let everyone know that if you have any questions throughout these presentations, feel free to type them into the chat. We will have a Q&A and discussion at the end, so we will read the questions that appear in the chat. All right, so our next speaker is Marie-Michelle Limoges. So Marie-Michelle completed a doctorate at the University of Montreal in 2014 on the astrophysics of white dwarfs. And during her research, she was mainly interested in observational astronomy using several large telescopes in Canada and in the United States. Since 2014, she has held a position within the management team of the Cosmodome, where she is responsible for museology and scientific content. Her responsibilities allow her to specialize in popular science in all of its forms, including mediation activities, exhibitions, media interviews, and training. So let me just spotlight Marie-Michelle. If I can find Marie-Michelle, if you could unmute yourself and...
I am unmuted.
Oh, thank
Hi.
you.
Hello, everybody. Okay. Meanwhile, I'll share my screen. Show it sounds.
Okay, so you're spotlighted, so the floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, I'm Marie-Michelle. As Virginia said, I work at the Cosmodome as a science and education director. I was trained as an astrophysicist, so I studied white dwarf stars for 7 years. And while I was studying the history of astronomy, I was really a fan of Henrietta Swan-Leavitt, so good choice of a historical period. Thanks for this very interesting presentation, Dominic. Mine will be very different. I'm also talking about women of science in the past, the pioneers, but I decided to choose more scientists and broaden the subject, so not only focus on astronomy, but also all areas of science, because not only women in astronomy had to face challenges, and Virginia asked me to talk about not only what these women accomplished, but also what challenges they had what challenges they encountered. So well, in brief, I based my presentation on an exhibition that we had at the Cosmodome for a few months. It's called Iron-Willed Women in STEM. It was made by Ingenium. It's a very important and interesting exhibition about women of science. And we discover a lot of very excellent scientists, but we also learn about the barriers that they had to break in order to be able to become what they are. When you read about all these barriers, you realize that they're still there. As Dominic just talked about, there was not equal pay back then in the early 90s. It's still not the case. When will it be the case? We don't know. We're still underrepresented. So these challenges are still true. And well, I decided to do a portrait of a few pioneers in sciences, not only in astronomy. So first one, I could not talk about Marie Curie, which was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. She is also the only person to win a Nobel Prize in 2 sciences, in physics and chemistry. So she won a Nobel Prize with Henri Becquerel and her husband Pierre Curie in 1903 for the discovery of radioactivity, but she also won it 7 years later in chemistry for the discovery of radium and polonium. So 2 radioactive elements. When her husband died in 1906, she took her place as professor of general physics in the Faculty of Sciences. So the first time a woman held this position. Virginia also asked me to talk about Canadian scientists. So here is Emma Baker, who became the first woman to earn a PhD from a Canadian university. I tried to find more information about her. It was very, very, very difficult to find more. So let's move on to Alice Wilson. She's also Canadian. She was the first female geologist of Canada. She was also a paleontologist. And well, when you're a geologist, you have to do field work. But her male colleagues did not really agree with the fact that she had to do field work, spend time living in camps with other men on remote sites. So she was denied the field opportunities and the vehicle. So what she did, she proposed to find an area she could explore by foot, by bicycle, or with her own car. So she settled for doing experiments closer to her home to be able to complete her studies, because she was not granted access to the men's field. So here's a picture. Here are two Canadian doctors. So Jenny Trout and Emily Stowe, they were the first women admitted to the Toronto School of Medicine, despite the disapproval of staff and students. I can witness that I was, well, some of my younger male fellow students, colleagues were expressing also their disapproval of women doing some kinds of areas of physics. So even in the 2010s, they were still disapproval and how do you say that? The stereotypes among my fellow students. So yeah, it's not new. But let's see what it looked like in the early 90s. So here is a minute heritage talking about Jenny Trout. So it's only 1 minute. Tell me if you hear the sound, please. Okay, good.
Send them home. Get rid of them. Gentlemen, please. And so, this organ, which I regret I cannot name because of the presence of these members of the weaker sex, who, although they are married, could not possibly endure...
Get them out.
Patience, Ginny. Patience.
Get them out!
Dr. McFarlane!
Mrs. Trout.
There's no place for women in a medical school.
Yeah. Get them out!
If you do not bring this classroom under control, I am going to repeat every word of this disgusting lecture to your charming wife.
My friend Jenny Trout was not the only woman to face this kind of thing in medical school. But she would become the first woman licensed to practice medicine in Canada.
So today medicine is dominated by women, but back then it was not the case. So she's really a trailblazer for all women who are now medical doctors. For Jenny Trout, her husband encouraged her to realize her dream of becoming a doctor. So, and even he helped her financially and emotionally. So this time the problem was the students and teachers. Harriet Brooks, she was the first woman to become a nuclear physicist, and she was quite a good nuclear physicist. She worked, let me see, she worked with Ernest Rutherford, which is considered the father of nuclear physics. She became the first woman to receive a master's degree from McGill. She was the first woman to obtain a graduate degree in electromagnetism. After she worked with Rutherford in Montreal, she went back to England working with Joseph John Thomson, who was Rutherford's mentor. So she worked with a very famous and important scientist in the history of the atom and radioactivity. And she even discovered that when you place a non-radioactive material in a radioactive chamber, where it causes the material to become radioactive. And this discovery was an essential contribution to Rutherford's theory of radioactivity and radioactive decay, for which he won the Nobel Prize in 1908. But when she got engaged, the dean of the college demanded that she resigns from her post. And she wrote back, "It is a duty I owe to my profession and to my sex to show that a woman has the right to practice of her profession and cannot be condemned to abandon it merely because she marries." Wow. So even with all her discoveries, she was demanded to resign because she was engaged. She did not. Okay. Well, I was asked to talk about women of the past. Well, Dr. Veena Rawat is still alive. She's born in 1945, but I thought her story was very interesting. Where she was born in India, moved to Canada. She was the only female in her undergraduate and graduate program. She studied engineering. She worked in communications in remote regions, and she studied the kinds of radio signals emitted from different types of cables when transmitted in tunnels and mines. So the important words here are tunnels and mines. So to gather data and do her PhD thesis, she had to visit and take data in a nickel mine in Northern Ontario, but she was denied access to the site because she was a woman, and her supervisor and her colleague had to gather the data for her. What was interesting about Mary Maynard Daly was that she was the first African-American woman to earn a PhD in chemistry, but it was also because she realized her father's dream. So he started studying chemistry, but he had to stop because of lack of funding. So she realized this dream. She became an excellent chemist. She did important work. Sorry, I had a blank about. I have it right here. She did important about cholesterol and blood pressure. She also committed to making science more inclusive. Also by, well, in honor of her father, she started a scholarship fund. Rosalind Franklin, she was the chemist who discovered the structure of DNA. Maybe you know the story. The Nobel Prize went to her 3 male colleagues who based their work on her findings. Well, she had the bad idea to show her work to Wilkins, which is one of the 3 who won the Nobel Prize. And they had a fight, so he had moved to Cambridge, to the university where he met Watson and Crick. So the 3 together, based on an image taken by Rosalind Franklin, they discovered the shape of the DNA and they got the Nobel Prize. After her death, Crick, well, he acknowledged that her work had been an important part of the discovery, but only after her death. So better late than never, she will have a rover named after her. So the ExoMars rover from the European Space Agency is now named Rosalind Franklin. What's the link? Well, you all know that we're looking for life on Mars, past or present. So better late than never. She's also still alive, Dr. Betty McRae. I wrote the title "Incredible but True" because look at the date. In 1982, she became Canada's first female neurosurgeon, which for me is quite astonishing. It's pretty late. So she became a neurosurgeon very late in her careers. She started as she had an undergraduate degree in physical education. She then graduated from medical school in 1968, completed a residency in endocrinology, followed by a year in internal medicine, and a few years in family practice. And in 1977, she realized that after she began a fellowship in neurology, and she realized that she wanted to be a neurosurgeon. This is when one neurosurgeon said that there was no way she could do it because she was too old, and more, she was a female. So she did it anyway, and she trained a lot of women doctors. So she's pretty proud of her legacy. Now, let's move to space. So 3 pioneers of space exploration. First of all, Valentina Tereshkova. She's a Russian engineer and cosmonaut. She was the first woman to fly in space in 1973. She's the only woman ever to have flown a solo space mission. What's interesting is that her flight lasted 71 hours, and at the time, it was more than all the American astronauts combined, which I find pretty cool. Roberta Bandar, she's Canada's first female astronaut. She's also a neurologist, where she visited the International Space Station and to study the effects of space travel on human body. Dr. Mae Jemison, you see there's a Lego figure. I have it right behind me, but you don't see it, it's too small. Mae Jemison, she's an engineer, a physician, and a NASA astronaut. In 1992, she became the first African-American woman in space. She was performing research on bone cell. After her career at NASA, she became professor at Dartmouth College, and she also founded 2 companies. One of her famous quote is, "Never be limited by others, people limited imagination." And she gave a very inspiring TED Talk in 2002 about where she recommended to teach arts and science at the same time together. So I strongly suggest that you watch it. It's a very good talk. So that was my overview of past women in science and the barriers that they had to break. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yay. Thank you so much, Marie. I really enjoyed that presentation. I feel like everyone always knows a male name in science, so it's nice to hear some women in science as well. Thank you so much. Okay, so our next presenter is Alaku and Miko. I really hope I'm saying that name right. If not, please tell everyone how to pronounce your name. So you're a 21-year-old Inuk born and raised in Montreal. And she's currently studying at John Abbott College in the science program and hopes to become the first Inuk astronomer. Take it away.
Hello, everybody. So like Lakshmi said, I'm Inuk. For the first 12 years of my life, I was the only Inuk student in my whole school. And all through high school, I was the only Inuk student, an Indigenous student in the entire school. It was only when I got to college that I was surrounded by other Indigenous peers. And a good amount of them were also in the science program, but very few of them are women. In my experience, in my science courses that I'm taking at John Abbott College, there's a good amount of women in my classes, but I'd say we're still kind of in the minority. And if you look even more into it, there aren't that many women of color in the science program. But I've been studying to become the first Inuit astronomer. Even though our people have been astronomers for decades. None of them have really been academically seen as an astronomer. So that's what I'm going to try to do. But I'm not the first Indigenous woman to get into astronomy, especially in Quebec. The first woman who got a PhD in astrophysics was Laurie Rouchon-Leptin. She obtained her PhD in astrophysics at the University of Laval. She was studying regions of stellar formation in spiral galaxies using an imaging spectrograph. And she currently works in Hawaii right now. But other women who have inspired me to become an astronomer, but also like a prominent figure for Indigenous people is Daname Kimilaktuk. She's the first Inuit cardiac surgeon. And it's very cool to see Inuit women in such high positions because, it's not that often that you would see Inuit women in positions as like these. But I was told to talk about women today, presently in present day. So women are more likely to discontinue higher education in STEM and are more likely to not consider a career in STEM. For example, 54% of women with a bachelor's degree in computer and information sciences obtained jobs in that field, compared with 74% of men. More women make up first-year university students in non-STEM programs, but the opposite is true for STEM programs. A 2006 study lists these reasons for less women not working STEM jobs: loss of interest in curriculum, feelings of isolation due to being outnumbered by male peers or unequal treatment from professors, or not seeing a career in STEM as a way to improve the lives of themselves or others. Feelings of isolation and unequal treatment by professors and male peers alike is often felt as early as high school by many girls actively pursuing STEM knowledge. I don't have to look up statistics to know that there have been girls who have been discouraged to study STEM because of the way they were treated in their high school robotics team or the way they were harassed by computer technology boys. Experiences like these and the knowledge that they persist beyond STEM education are a big reason that female STEM students can feel so discouraged. And this does not even begin to discuss the issues of racism within the field. And this reminds me of the big, I would say like colonialist viewpoint in astronomy that I've noticed in the past, several years of being in college, because people are always talking about like colonizing Mars or like colonizing the moon, which is like probably not the best word to use, I'd say, because colonizing's not a good thing, but you know, who am I to say? But so like in my experience, everyone has been really nice to me. No one has ever said anything like really mean to my face, but I think that's just because people are nice. In 2019, I was invited to Whitehorse, which is all the way across the country from where I am right now. And I was invited there as a guest, as a speaker, like I am today. But we were there for Aurora 360 experience, which is looking at the Aurora Borealis from a plane, which was an amazing experience. I would recommend it, but it's kind of expensive. So, for once in a lifetime, I would do it. But it was very fun. There was a lot of other astronomy people there, but only one of them was a woman other than me, which was kind of interesting. But they made sure to like make everyone feel comfortable and feel safe, and like there was like a couple other indigenous folk there, but other than that, it was very nice. Also, I think a year ago, I'm not sure, I was invited to the Montreal Space Symposium, and there I met up with, there was another girl there, one of a participant, who was also an Indigenous woman studying in astronomy, and it was just like our paths have crossed, like it was meant to be. And it was really nice to meet here, and now we're friends. But, you know, with the pandemic and everything, we haven't really been able to like see anyone like at all. And because of the pandemic, I haven't been in school in a while, but I hope to go back this fall because I really miss school and really miss being in like an academic environment. And hopefully I will be able to go to that again. But that is the end of my talk. I didn't really prepare much today, and I'm very sorry, but that's my experience in the STEM field.
Thank you, Alaku. That was actually very interesting to hear about your experience, because it's important to have a look at the personal side of things, because it's not all about numbers. It's also about the experiences that women from all backgrounds experience in the field. So thank you very much for sharing today. So we are going to move on to our next and final speaker. So our next speaker is Bettina Forget. She is the director of the SETI Institute's Artist in Residence program in California, as well as the founder and director of the Visual Voice Gallery in Montreal. She is currently a public scholar and a doctoral candidate in art education at Concordia University. Bettina's creative work explores the subjects of astronomy, science fiction, and feminism. Her research examines the recontextualization of art and science and how transdisciplinary education may disrupt gender stereotypes. So I will pass it on to you, Bettina. I will spotlight you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Am I spotlit?
You soon will be.
All right.
There you are. The floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, and it's been just such a delight to hear all the other presentations. Thank you for sharing all of those wonderful historical perspectives. And so I'm here to speak about the future of women in the STEM field. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me see. All right. So I'm going to look at different access points into science, into STEM, that we may want to consider going forward. So as you know, my life is sort of happens at the intersection of art and science. As a trained artist, as an amateur astronomer, as evidenced by my telescope behind me. And those who know me, I have a long-standing relationship with the RASC as you know, God, when did I first become member? When I first came to Montreal, I think 2002, 2003, something like that. So long-time amateur astronomer. So obviously for me, art and astronomy and science very much intermingle. But it's not easy to break into science. And let me see. I was kind of hoping that I could advance my slides. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna have to try to escape. So I can neither.
Perhaps if you stop sharing the screen and reshare it and
oh, okay.
The option.
Okay, because I've lost my cursor, so I can't even stop. I'm just gonna see, escape. So this is what happens when you have a really old iMac. So, okay, it advanced. Let's hope my computer continues to cooperate. So I pulled out this cartoon because I think it's so apt in demonstrating what happens with gender stereotyping in the STEM field. So, guys, you're not good at math. That's just you. You're treated like an individual. But when women or girls may experience an issue or trip up or aren't perfect. All girls are horrible at math. This is what's called a stereotype threat. And it doesn't only apply to girls in that situation, it's really also true for any minority, even though women are not a minority, 51% of the planet, but in the field of science, you stick out as a minority. So then you become kind of the torchbearer, the person who represents everyone in your field. And this has detrimental consequences because of this kind of stereotype threat. And we've talked about this before in previous presentations. Women self-select out of sciences, even though tests demonstrate that girls and boys do equally well in the STEM field, even in math. Girls presume that they don't do well in the sciences, and they go into the arts and the humanities. And so since I am studying education, particularly art education, I wondered if I could take that disadvantage and turn it into an advantage. And here I'm going to talk a little bit about STEAM education. So we've heard about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So now this new movement in education introduces art as a way to more fully comprehend and contextualize what we do in science. But it's also, I think, a really great access ramp for girls into the STEM field, because if they're already presuming that they're doing very well in art and in the humanities, why not use that and create experiences and learning environments where art and science are so intermingled that they won't be able to tell whether they're doing art or science. So this is what I'm doing. The problem is, though, very often with what's called STEAM education, and especially that is aimed at girls, art is kind of an afterthought. So everybody is making a robot project, and then in the end it is painted, and they painted pink, and now it's just, now it's a girl's project. This is really not what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in doing a science project, just doing a poster at the end and going like, oh, here's the art. I want to integrate art at the very beginning of the project so that when people participate, you cannot tell whether you've just done art or science. So an example of this kind of thing is, for example, my workshops that are called Moon Mission. And the way they work is that I offer a prompt and I say, imagine you're going to the moon, and I put up a big moon map and I say, pick any place on the moon, any place at all. You own that place. And now you're going to make an artwork that illustrates what that place would look like. You're giving a mission report from your voyage in the form of an artwork. And I don't restrict what that artistic medium would be. So you're seeing in that bottom right-hand corner, you can 3D print, you can use microscope, you can do take a Zoom recorder and do audio field recordings, you can paint, you can print, anything at all, whatever you feel comfortable with and whatever will support your story. So some people did like a little mini podcast and like a spoken word. And so this is here on the left. So in this group, the first Moon Mission workshop, actually I tested it out with both artists and scientists to make sure that what I was presenting was actually scientifically sound and actually also worked as an art education experience. So I had some people from the Canadian Space Agency who came in. I had some mid-career artists who came in. And what was really interesting is that this mingling of art and science seemed to give both the artists and the scientists a permission to venture into the other discipline. So what I noticed was that the scientists all produced work that was very imaginative and personal. They would use paints or this piece, No Footprints to Follow. So really beautifully executed spoken words piece of somebody getting lost on the moon and then dying. Like we were all in the studio like nearly crying. It was so good. And all the artists started to doing like hardcore science suddenly and sort of imagining, hey, let me design a space elevator that could, live on the moon. And what was so nice is having this mixed group between artists and scientists was that as they were working out the art projects, they actually talked to each other. And the person from the CSA was looking to Jesse, the artist, and saying, that could really work because of the, low gravity environment. And it was like really nice that in these kind of situations, as an educator, I can actually step back a little bit, and the peer learning that takes over is actually as strong or not even stronger than that more hierarchical teacher-student situation that happens normally in classrooms. So in this Moon Mission workshop, I talk about the full cycle of the creative process. So we start with research that was actual scientific research. Everybody got astronomy readings about the moon. Then there was this experimentation process where people were just doing sketching and conversations. Then they made their artworks, and in the end, as you can see, they also exhibited, which was then also really nice because it gave all the participants a chance to get feedback from the general public who were seeing the artworks. So I think that was a really successful approach to teaching science by actually saying, you're coming to an art gallery and you're making artworks, but sort of surreptitiously, you sneak all that science in. And the debriefs afterwards, I did questionnaires, and it was a really good experience, especially for the artists who felt much less intimidated by the science content than if they had just come to a straight up astronomy lecture about the moon. So this hands-on component can be a real benefit if we want to get more women into the STEM field. I recently participated in a conference by the International Astronomical Union about education and science education. And one of the presentations was what is called the Rose Report, which is the relevance of science education. So the Rose Report doesn't just measure how much science is understood. The Rose Report measures how, after you've done your science education, how do you feel it actually impacts your life? Why should you even care about science? So this is a very interesting perspective to take. And there were a couple of fascinating findings. One was, for example, that science was much more valued by students in less developed countries than in what's called first world countries. But what the researchers didn't expect was a really big gender split. They hadn't actually coded for gender, and they had no intention to research gender, but it came out of the data so strong that in the end, they included it in their findings. And you can really see the shift here that in what they call the wealthy countries, girls are not enthusiastic about science. They don't like it in schools. They don't want to be scientists. They don't want to have anything to do with science. They don't want to have it in schools. So that is pretty sad. What was also really interesting is if you are a science professor in school and you're trying to impress your students with experiments that are very noisy and loud and do lots of explosions, the boys will be super interested, girls will not be, as you can see on the graph on the left, explosive chemicals. So the context of how the science is taught is actually really important. What I loved, I was like jumping in my seat when I heard this. Apparently, the possibility of life outside Earth is the thing that all the students could agree on super interesting. Everybody was hot for this topic. So if you want to teach science, if you want to get girls and women interested in the STEM field, the kind of entry drug to science is astronomy, and particularly the quest for life beyond Earth. And I'm very happy to learn this because, you know, I work for the SETI Institute. So looking for extraterrestrial life is like a large part of what my research is about, like indirectly, but because I'm there as the director of the Artist in Residence program, but still I work with all the researchers there. And so here's a shot of the SETI Institute's Allen Telescope Array up in Northern California in Hat Creek. So this is part of what the SETI Institute does. But the Carl Sagan Center also does a lot of astrobiology. So that is looking for the, or researching, studying the development of life, the origin of life, and the development of intelligent life as well. So it is a fascinating field. So I'm glad that students are excited about science if it has to do with the question of life beyond Earth. So what I do at the SETI Institute also connects art and science. So we have what's called the AIR program, that is our Artist in Residence program. And what happens there is that we are inviting established artists to stay with us, well, virtually, for 2 years. So we team them up with SETI researchers, and conversations ensue between the artists and the researchers, and an artwork is produced at the end. Our current cohort of artists includes musicians, spoken word artists, installation artist, an experimental philosopher. We also have people in theater, people who do drawing, but it's all very cutting edge, very contemporary work, and sometimes includes technology. It doesn't always have to. A beautiful example is Rachel Zussman's work, the cosmic background radiation. So this is a biennale of an early cohort of SETI artists in residence. They had an exhibition at the New Museum in Los Gatos in the Silicon Valley. And you can see here a little bit what this piece is about. So what Rachel did was she used colored sand to create a mandala, like a Tibet mandala, but recreated a picture of cosmic background radiation. So I thought, you know, it's an absolutely stunning idea. We always say that, you know, there are as many stars, as many galaxies as like grained in the sand and all the oceans of Earth. So to actually use sand as a metaphor. And also Rachel deals with the dimension of time. So it takes a lot of time to create this artwork. She did this as the exhibition was running. And of course, following the Tibetan spirit, as soon as the last grain of sand was laid, she destroyed the piece because, you know, we are all ephemeral. And so is the universe. So this is like one example. This is our current artist, Sin Lu. She's actually also working at the MIT Media Lab as the curator for space exploration. She herself has gone up in what is called the Vomit Comet. So she's doing parabolic flights, and she's taken all kinds of artworks, experiments up there, and she's looking at movement and movement in zero gravity. So some of our artists are actually working right at the cusp of art and science and doing kind of scientific research, but through the lens of an artist. So they're asking different kind of, they're asking the same questions, but their research just takes a different track. It's more subjective and it connects more with the human condition. And another project that I would like to highlight, because it's still running, is the Earthling project. So this is a project that is running right now, instigated by the composer, Mexican composer, Felipe Perez Santiago. And he has launched the Earthling app for free at the, you can download it on your iPhone. And he's asking everyone all over the world to sing a cappella, sing right into the app. You sing something that represents your culture, your folklore, your mood, and you get to sing 3 songs, 30 seconds each. These songs will be sent to the moon this year as part of the Peregrine mission. So it'll be an actual physical disc that will be left on the moon. Felipe is also composing a symphony. He's a composer. He does a lot of contemporary opera. He also composes for movies, and he has his own orchestra, classical orchestra. So he's going to compose a symphony inspired by all the voices from all over the earth. And he already has participants from like 45 countries, like, already has hundreds of voices, and has created a couple of tracks already that are going to the moon. So again, this takes a more philosophical stance, because so he's working with Jill Tarter. This is his scientific partner, and Jill is one of the founders of the SETI Institute. And her perspective is always, we are looking for alien life because we want to understand ourselves better. We don't know what life really is or what it means because we only have one planet to model it on. So as soon as we find life elsewhere, we'll have a much better understanding what that means. And so Felipe's idea of creating a universal song of all Earthlings was really something that really harmonized well with why Jill has been looking for alien signals for the last 40 years. And I think one of the fantastic access ramp into STEM are female role models. And we've heard a lot of in the previous presentations about role models from the past, but we have a lot of fantastic current role models as well, and Jill is certainly one of them. She was one of the founders of the SETI Institute, integral. Her vision was integral for the fact that this institute exists. She overcame many obstacles. Back when I was doing my MA research, I interviewed her actually. And if you, normally nobody reads MA dissertations, but in this case, actually, it may be an interesting read because I've interviewed Jill about her life. And she ran into many obstacles, and that was in the 50s and 60s. So for example, she was eligible for a scholarship because of a family sort of eligibility. There was apparently because of her background and the family that she was related to, she could get a scholarship to study at college. But when they found out that she was a woman, they withdrew the funding and she had to find it elsewhere. Also, the university, at the university, all the women had a curfew. So they had to be in their dorms at like 9 p.m. And of course, the men didn't have a curfew. So they could socialize after hours and hang out and chat and exchange ideas, and the women were all sequestered, and I don't know what they were supposed to do, paint their toenails. So Jill did not like this kind of thing. She's very rebellious and she's pushy, and she will always be the squeaky wheel, and she got her way. And she said one of the reasons why she got into and really fascinated with this question of SETI researchers at that time, it was seen as really quirky. SETI Institute started in the 70s, became its own independent organization in the 80s. And at the time, like, you're looking for little green man, that is so weird. So there weren't a lot of people there. It wasn't really very prestigious. So having a woman in that field was, she didn't get a lot of headwind. Now, of course, it's very popular. But by this time, there's so many women in the field of SETI research and astrobiology, you actually find many, many women there. So Jill used to be the director and chief of the Carl Sagan Center. Now it's Natalie Cabral. So Jill is now retired. Natalie Cabral is a phenomenal woman. She is now the director of the Carl Sagan Center, but her focus is in astrobiology, and she works in the field. So she will go to the Atacama Desert in Chile and look at the driest, saltiest, most inhospitable environments on Earth to see what still lives there, and if that can give us clues about what could live beyond Earth. So they're basically Mars analogs. Natalie is very interested in finding life on Mars, and she will leave no stone unturned on Earth and the Antarctic. She basically, if it's a desert, if it's on Earth, Natalie has been there. And, you know, her work is absolutely phenomenal. And she also has a really strong, so her background is French. And I think the French are very strong with philosophy. There are a lot of contemporary French philosopher, you know, starting from Foucault and going from there. And just the ideas that she has about what sentience means, what quantum physics means, what that means for the nature of our universe. You really need to look her up and look at some of her YouTubes. She gives phenomenal talks. Working with Natalie is Kimberly Warren Rhodes. So she also goes into these really dry environments. Now what she does is super interesting. She looks at microbial ecosystems. So treating the underside of a rock as its whole integral microsystem. And she looks for patterns, visual physical patterns. And she's found that life itself creates visual patterns. So if you understand how these patterns are created on Earth, and you find similar patterns on another celestial body, Mars, Titan, wherever, you can very much more focus your search for extraterrestrial life. So pioneering work. And I have one more woman, if my cursor would work. I realized as you guys were talking that I forgot to include a woman. I don't have a picture of her right now. It's Margaret Race. She is the person who's responsible for the fact that we have planetary protection. Her background is in ecology. So she's an ecologist. She looked at invasive species. And when NASA, way back in the 90s, was going to send a sample return mission to Mars, they were very worried that on that return, microbes from Mars would be introduced into Earth's environment, and maybe there would be contagion. As an ecologist, Margaret turned this around and said, well, guys, have you thought about all the kind of bugs and germs that we're bringing to Mars? We need to protect other celestial bodies from us. So, and because of that insight, planetary protection policy now exists. I'm going to just see. Okay, and this is Laurie Fenton. So the reason I include her is because she looks at wind and how wind shapes sand dunes. And I didn't know this. I just talked to her last week, and she says she can read the age of a sand dune by the wavy pattern on top. And you can actually slice through a sand dune like a tree rings, and you can tell how old that sand dune is and how long it's been moving. So since we're looking at Mars and we're mostly looking at sand dunes, her work is really phenomenal and will give us fantastic insights about you know, how other celestial bodies, how other planets and moons actually function. So these are all women who are pioneers in their field. So if you are interested in science at all, if you want to get somebody interested in science, and especially women, this is the field to be, because in exoplanet research and astrobiology, it's really filled with women. And, you know, the world is not just your oysters. Like exoplanets and the entire universe are your oysters. And I think this is, if you're talking about future and the future access points into the STEM field, I think this is a really great way to go. So that's my presentation. Thanks very much. Here's my contact details if you want to get in touch. And let's see if I can manage to stop the sharing. I have my cursor back. That's awesome. All right. That's my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bettina, for that talk. It was really interesting to see the overlap between art and science, which I think isn't necessarily emphasized too much in the science curriculum. So it was very insightful. Thank you very much. All right, so we have seen our 4 wonderful speakers who have given very informative talks. And right now I'm going to move on to questions. If you have questions, please don't hesitate. Type them in the chat and we will get to them. All right, so first, we did have one question from Laurie Roche. And I think this was referring to Dominique's presentation. She asked, did you actually see the plates? Which I assume she's referring to the plates you showed in your presentation.
No, these are, they're online, they're accessible. I didn't see the plates, but I can tell you that right now the Harvard Observatory is about 550,000 plates that they are scanning to make them available to researchers. It's that these plates are a treasure because they allow people to go and look back 100 years, over 100 years, how the sky was. And right now it's a huge project going on. No, I've never seen it, but I would love to see those plates.
So a few questions, and these are open to every speaker. So if you wish to answer, go ahead and unmute yourself. So I guess the first question regarded something that I think Bettina mentioned while she was presenting, which was if you are part of a minority group in a field, you kind of become the torchbearer, like the reference for whatever demographic group you are assumed to belong to. And so I was wondering if you want to speak further to that. So maybe how not to automatically do that, but at the same time, if you want to know more about a certain demographics group's participation in science, isn't it like the regular reaction maybe to kind of turn towards the person that might belong to that group? So where do you find the balance?
I think that this is really a problem not of the person who is the minority, but the other people. And this is really a structural issue. Science typically is seen as a male domain. And we've seen that tonight, women were not even allowed to attend universities. Women were not allowed to publish papers. Many women, some of those Harvard computers, once they actually scored a teaching position, they had to either resign when they got married or they couldn't earn any income at all. So that kind of flavors that domain, that discipline. And there are echoes of that today, even though things are more equal now. They're not 100% equal. So this idea that, men, there's this drawing test, right? There's like draw a scientist and everybody draws like, Einstein. And nobody draws a female scientist. It's because it's just so ingrained into us. So then if you see something that is outside the norm, that person then becomes everybody, right? You become, that one woman then is the representative for all women. And it's really not up to that woman. That burden is not on her to educate everybody that I'm one of many women. Some women are really great at algebra and others are better at lab work and some are better at drawing. It's really contingent on everybody else in the room to understand that this field is for everyone. And I'm sure that Alaku, you know, like you talked about this as well, being the only person, you know, and you know, only when you came to the university did you find others like yourself. And you know, it's exhausting to feel that you're sticking out all the time, you know. So I think it really hinders women in science. You always sort of, you know, double checking yourself. You always have to be more perfect because you are so under the magnifying glass, and it's really pressure, the responsibilities is on the majority to ease up.
Mm-hmm. And actually speaking, you referred to personal experience, and I think everyone can answer this question. Have you personally experienced this bias against you while pursuing your research in the field? I know, Marie-Michel, you mentioned how your colleagues often thought and said that you did not belong. So I was wondering if any of the others, or you want to elaborate on that.
If I may, first, I would like to go back to the other question about when you're the only one in your field, but when you're they call it intersectionality. Identifying with more than one underrepresented group, based, for example, on race, sexuality, or gender, can create unique challenges. So it's a double or triple challenge. So it has a word. It's intersectionality. And for the stereotypes, I heard 19-year-old boys say out loud for everybody to hear that girls, not women, girls go choose astrophysics as a branch of physics because it's much easier than, let's say, solid state physics. I heard that from 19-year-old boys. Yeah. So this is one of many examples. I heard that also in astrophysics, girls are good with keeping lists and instrument and lab and experimental physics, because we're more attentive to details, while men, they're better at computing and coding. I heard that a lot.
Which is not true at all. I know women who code very, very well, actually.
And I'm not that old. I mean, I finished my PhD in 2014. So
yeah. So this isn't necessarily something that's purely relegated to the past. It's something that persists in the present. So I don't know if Dominique or Bettina or Alaku, you had any challenges, and maybe also how you faced them, because I'm sure if there's any young woman in the audience who might also be facing these challenges, if you had any advice or recommendations, and also recommendations for the people in the crowd who don't identify as a woman, who, might, as Bettina said, is also their job to make sure that they don't carry on these biases.
Well, I mean, my background is not strictly in science. I come out of the arts, but in amateur astronomy and astronomical science, I'm for a long time a member of the International Association of Astronomical Artists, also mostly men. So also maker spaces, I was in the 3D printing meetup, only woman. You always end up being the only woman. And I noticed that when I look at other women who end up being the only woman, like in the maker space or in the women who do welding, I have friends who are artists, they weld, but they're the only women there with their welding gun. And they start to butch up a little bit, wear the ironic t-shirts and the short hair, try not to stand out too much. I go the other way. I think you can operate a 3D printer wearing a skirt and heels, and I wear them on purpose because I'm entitled to be a woman and lug a 8-inch telescope at the same time, which I can do. And, you know, like I'm overtly more femme because I'm creating space for everybody. And I don't want to sort of submit to the sort of the male look just to fit in. I don't need to fit in. I'm already not fitting in because I'm an artist and I show up weirdly colored. So I will also, you know, wear a dress. And some other women sometimes in these environments then look at me weird because now they don't know what to do. So it's always really uncomfortable. But I think you just need to, stand your ground. Just do that. Stand your ground and just follow what you're interested in and just do it. And when somebody at a star party refers to you as misinformation, you just in your head tell them to, you know, pick a finger and spin on it, and you just continue with your star party. That's it.
Very good. That was a very good piece of advice. And I think I'm going to ask each of the three other speakers to end, because we are getting close to 10 o'clock and I'm sure people want to get going. So the question for everyone is, what piece of advice would you give a girl, or doesn't even have to be a young girl, really anyone who doesn't fit in what they are interested in and might feel a bit outcast? What would you tell them? It might be a bit difficult, but I'll pick someone. Dominique?
I do things I like to do and I don't worry too much about it, but I wanted to say something earlier. In 71, when I was in 1971, when I was in CEGEP, there were a lot of girls in technique informatique. And when my husband started to work in computers, there were a lot of women working with him coding, that had a college education or degrees coding with him. And we don't know what happened. But now there seems to be a lot less women doing that from the time we were in. And we're always curious about what happened. Because when I say there were a lot, there were a lot. So in computers. So I'm really perplexed about that. We both are. We don't know what happened because they were there, you know, they had their place, they had jobs. My husband worked with them.
Yeah.
And now they're all retiring. And, you know, from what we hear, there aren't many women in those fields. So,
well, it's probably, I mean, I don't know the cause, but, you know, it would be useful if also in schools, in the science programs, and the science teachers kind of took the information, like Bettina gave very useful information about what gets girls interested in science over boys. But in science classes, at least in my experience, it's the demonstrations were all demonstrations that Bettina said got boys more interested in science. And so you are leaving behind that half of the population if you decide to only pick one form of education in a certain field. So I think that, I mean, for any teachers out there, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, but I think it's important for a broader approach to teaching, like Bettina said. Aliku, is there anything you would like to tell an aspiring scientist who might not feel welcomed?
Nothing is really coming to mind, but what, like, you know, you kind of just have to like worry about yourself. Like you think that everyone's looking at you, but everyone's kind of worrying about themselves. So you just have to worry about yourself and like try to get through it, and like, you know, just like try to, you know, do what you want to do, and like if you enjoy it, just keep doing it. And going back to the thing for like the torch bearer, because because I said I wanted to be the first Inuk astronomer. A lot of Inuit now like see me as this like icon and like this person that like for people to look up to, which is good because you know it gets children and teenagers interested in going into a higher education. But it's still kind of like stressful. Like I still feel like the weight on my shoulders, but it's also like it's very inspiring and like it keeps me motivated to like do better so that those following in my footsteps can also like keep going further than me. But also like with the barriers, I'm still in this present day, I still kind of get like a little bit like of microaggressions at like some places that are like, you know, it's probably not good.
Yeah.
But I would say it's gotten better in the past couple of years, but like there's still, you know, a little bit of microaggressions here and there. But what I would give advice is just like, you know, if you enjoy it, keep doing it. Like, you know, no one's gonna stop you, and if they do, just like push them out of the way, and you can do it.
That sounds like very good advice. Thank you very much. If any of you have any final words to say before we wrap up and call it a night.
Maybe
okay. Go ahead.
Maybe just one last thing. We talk about we have to push, you know, and the responsibilities on the woman just to hang in there and just keep pushing. What's also really helpful is to be with other women, and there's more and more, and have these kind of conversations so that we know that you're not alone in thinking that you suck at math. You know, there are others, and we all have this kind of spotlight effect, and just realizing that that's what the situation is, to have an opportunity to articulate it and then maybe band together, and then we can be strong together, makes it a lot easier to, you know, weather the microaggressions and the odd comments. So, you know, together we're strong.
Yes,
Exactly.
I think that is the, especially today, unity is definitely an important thing to keep in mind and to keep striving for. So thank you very much to all of our speakers, Bettina, Alaku, Marie-Michel, and Dominique. And thank you everyone who joined us this evening for this interesting discussion. It was very informative, and I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot from it. And well, I think there's nothing left to say, but have a good evening. And I hope that you join us for our next public events and perhaps even members' events.